Democratic State Representative Victoria Neave Criado of Mesquite, and also the chair of the Mexican-American Legislative Caucus. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we just heard that the U.S. Justice Department now says it is assessing the legality of the state's use of razor wire, the concertina wire that we've seen along the Rio Grande, and wanted to get your reaction to this latest development.
When we hear of women, a pregnant mom who was trapped in barbed wire while she's having a miscarriage, when we hear of children who are being pushed back into the river by our own DPS troopers, who are our top law enforcement agency in the state, is extremely disturbing and concerning. So we're glad to hear that the federal government is stepping in to evaluate that. There are numerous concerns, even potential violations of international treaties that are implicated here. And so for us, regardless of how folks feel about immigration, having respect for the human dignity of folks, of children, of moms who are attempting to come to our nation for a better life, and just making sure that our state is doing the right thing and at least treating them with the dignity for their life.
And this comes on top of the Office of Inspector General at Texas DPS launching an investigation into this state trooper's claims that officers were told to push people back into the Rio Grande in the Eagle Pass area and not give them water. And so and Mexico's president just came out now and said, this is inhumane. So what do you make of the fact that the state has launched its own investigation into this?
Yes, no, we're glad that the state is investigating this, and we commend the DPS trooper who was willing to step forward, essentially, is a whistleblower to shine a light on what's just flat out wrong. It is about ensuring that in this extreme Texas heat, if you see somebody without water, and we have the water, the fact that DPS troopers were told to not give them water is unconscionable. It's about life and respecting life in our state. And so we commend the DPS trooper, and we're, as a caucus, want to ensure that every legislative tool, that any investigation, including by our state and by the federal government, is launched, and that the truth comes to light.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, what more can be done? What more do you think should be done? What legislative tools do you think that you can use in this case?
We are in ongoing conversations. I think that, one, it's necessary assuming that we don't get the information that we need, besides having particular meetings with DPS, which we are already involved in and working on, but two, having legislative hearings on these issues to investigate specifically what other policies and procedures are being put in place that are potentially violating federal law or international laws. We know that there's an issue. We acknowledge that it is time for change, certainly at the federal government especially. We need comprehensive immigration reform, but really what we need more than ever is for folks to put partisanship aside to try to resolve this issue. We, as our caucus is a bipartisan caucus, and there have been solutions put forth by various members of our caucus to address a lot of the issues on the border. And some of those were put into law and some were not. And at the same time, we dealt with some really extreme policy proposals this last legislative session that would have taken us backwards. And, for example, creating a civilian vigilante force that wouldn't just operate on the border, but the entire state. So what we're seeing here is disrespect. It's just a flat out unconscionable policies that should not be a part of our DPS policy. So we want to ensure that if there are moms, if there are children, that individuals who are asylum seekers go through the proper process and are connected with the federal counterparts as they're entering the border.
I wanted to ask you, have you, as chair of your caucus, have you or has anybody else had any discussions with Speaker Dade Phelan or his office, or at the very least, the Homeland Security Committee in the House to launch its own investigation, or at the very least, to establish hearings?
What I'd like to say is that we've had some confidential discussions with some individuals. I don't want to state who or what yet. We want to ensure that things like that do happen, and we're trying to ensure that we take the proper procedures and protocols because it's not just Homeland Security. There are other potential committees that have jurisdiction over different issues, and so we're trying to analyze the best option. Time is of the essence as well, but we want to ensure that this information gets in the hands of our members of both parties and members of the Texas House of Representatives and the Texas Senate as well.
And what other committees are you referring to?
For example, we think that the potential criminal jurisprudence committee should be involved here. There's an international relations committee that could potentially see the issues between the potential violations of the international treaty. So I chair the county affairs committee. We want to evaluate what potential agencies or how counties would be impacted by things like this and on the border. And so we're having ongoing discussions. We want to do our due diligence and ensure that the laws that we pass as this information is coming out. And we're so thankful again to the trooper, to the media for highlighting this issue. We want to make sure that we get to the root of it so that individuals are not dying as they are coming into the hands of DPS.
And what did you make of the joint statement yesterday that was issued by Governor Abbott and Steve McCraw, who directs Texas DPS, the Texas Border Star Mike Banks, and the Texas Adjutant General Major General Thomas Selzer, saying, quote, that no orders or directions were given that would compromise the lives of those attempting to cross the border illegally? What do you make of that?
I think the DPS troopers' willingness to come forward, show how this is inhumane, really is speaking truth to what's really happening. And I can see how some of the statewide leaders would attempt to deny it, but that email from that particular trooper is every person that's crossing in many of our eyes are children of God. And the fact that we are crossing a line, the fact that he's willing to openly state the policies and procedures that they have been instructed to do in rejecting, pushing children back into the river, having barrels that are wrapped with barbed wire that are essentially death traps for people crossing the river is seriously concerning. And we want to ensure that the federal laws and that international laws are not being violated by our Texas DPS troopers.
In that same release yesterday, the joint statement, they also said that the state is using the concertina wire and the buoys to act as a deterrent to prevent people from crossing the Rio Grande. What do you make of that? I also spoke with the lieutenant governor yesterday who had seen the article but wasn't aware of the whole situation. But he blamed President Biden for the situation for people crossing into the United States. So your reaction to both those things?
Sure. We know that deterrent policies really haven't been working. I'm a daughter of an immigrant. When my dad came to our country without papers, he's a citizen now and proud to be an American citizen. We need to look at the underlying root causes of why people are coming to our country. We are the best country in the world, and the fact that people are willing to risk their lives to escape the situation that they're in, willing to, bring their children to our countries. There's a huge labor shortage in our state and in our country. There is a huge need for workers in our country, in our state. And so we need to look at the root causes of also the issues in other nations that are driving individuals to come to our great nation.
I also wanted to ask you about the property tax relief bills that passed last week. Some people said finally. So what was your reaction? You were among those who voted for it.
Yes, and I will say that Democrats have long championed a increase to the homestead exemption, and so that was one of the pieces that we were really pleased and wanted to ensure, because many of our constituents will benefit from that. There were some missed opportunities with respect to the property tax legislation. So, and one of those is the fact that renters were left out. And the other big issues is that teachers, we are seeing teachers leave the profession by the droves, and we need them. We have a teacher shortage. And the fact that we were not able to have amendments that Democrats proposed, that we were not able to have language in the legislation to ensure teacher pay, the fact that they kicked the ball for a few months down the road is not enough. It's something that we should have addressed, that we tried to get into this piece of legislation that we voted on, and it was blocked by Republicans. But we have teachers' backs. We want to ensure that we raise their pay, and not just teachers, but educators, individuals, janitors, where all the workers in our schools have the money that they need, so that we keep them in the profession, and we have enough teachers to educate our 5.5 million kids in Texas public schools.
Before I ask you another follow-up on the teacher salaries, as it relates to the renters, why was the push to include renters and to give renters a break so late in the process?
There's been a push for renters since the beginning. I think it's been a matter of how renters would benefit. So the renters pay taxes just like everybody else, and helped contribute to this huge record surplus that we had. And so they should also reap the benefits in their rent. We know that in Dallas, for example, Dallas County rent continues to increase, and there's no guarantee that, with all due respect to landlords, there's no guarantee that cost savings is going to be passed down to the renter. So that's something that Democrats have been advocating for, to ensure that renters are included in some way in this property tax relief proposal.
And then back to the teacher pay raises. I spoke with both the speaker and the lieutenant governor in the last week, and they said both of them said that they are committed to approving teacher raises. They said that there's $5 billion set aside in the budget for increasing school funding, and much of that would include for teacher raises. What specifically would you like to see?
I think that, the funding that has been allocated, that was, months in the making, and we should have had it done. We should have passed that now to get the dollars in our school districts' hands, who are going through their budgets appropriations right now. And some school districts are having to dip into their reserves to even try to have something to and ask teachers to stay. But we want to give them a teacher increase. We want to increase the basic allotment as well, which is the amount of money that a child would that a school district would obtain per child. In Texas, we have one of the lowest amounts of investment and per pupil spending, and we're the best state in the country. And in order for our economic prosperity to continue, we want to make sure that every single kid, regardless of their zip code, is educated and has the best education. And so to do that, we need to put our money where our mouth is, and ensure that we get these dollars into the hands of our public schools to educate every kid.
I know back in the 2019 session, teachers, I believe, were given a $5,000 raise. Is that something that you'd like to see this time? Is that even possible, given the money that was set aside?
I think that we want to give them that or more. We want to ensure that whatever funds that are in the budget that are appropriate allocated equitably to the school districts across the state. That, for example, Dallas, I represent parts of Dallas, Garland, and Mesquite that are 3 school districts, and school districts in North Texas and Dallas County get the funds that they deserve and should be entitled to. And so I think that the pay raise, the actual number is to be discussed and debated, but we want to make sure that they're taken care of so that we don't lose more teachers and we get more individuals into the profession, so that so that our kids have all the resources that they need to prosper.
Democratic State Representative Victoria Neave Criado of Mesquite, Dallas, and Garland, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation.